War has borders, maps have borders, but soldiers go where the silence tells them to go. They called it Laos. The White House called it neutral territory. But the men I'm about to tell you about, they called it something else entirely. The place we don't talk about. These were the ghosts of MACV, teams that walked across lines drawn in pencil, lines politicians pretended were real, lines enemies pretended didn't exist. Every step they took was a secret. Every mission a lie wrapped in a smile. If they died somewhere else. If they survived, they returned without names. Tonight, I'll tell you the story of one such team. A patrol that crossed a border that wasn't supposed to be there, and found something the paperwork could never bury. If you're ready, lower your voice, and listen to the footsteps of men the world tried very hard to forget. The helicopter flew blacked out, hugging the tree line like a wounded animal, trying not to be noticed. Inside, the recon team sat shoulder to shoulder, faces streaked with camouflage, eyes fixed on the dark jungle below. No patches, no flags. Their uniforms were intentionally mismatched. Deniable, disposable, forgettable. Sergeant Carter checked his watch. 0041 hours. Officially, this flight did not exist. The door gunner tapped the sergeant twice. 2 minutes to drop. Below them, Laos stretched out like a black ocean, unmarked and silent. The US government swore no American forces were operating there. Carter almost laughed. They'd inserted teams here 50 times already. The map said neutral. The ground said otherwise. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. LZ is hot. No lights. No hover. You jump. You run. The team stood. 8 men. 3 Montagnard fighters. 1 mission. Locate a suspected supply artery feeding the Ho Chi Minh Trail and erase it. The helicopter flared hard, just high enough to break your legs if you landed wrong. The men jumped anyway. Boots hit mud. Bodies rolled into darkness. Within seconds, the helicopter was gone, swallowed by the night, as if it had never been there. Carter signaled with a closed fist. The team formed up, radio silence already in effect. The jungle was thick, wet, and hostile. Every vine felt like a hand trying to pull you backward. They had studied the satellite photos, but the terrain felt wrong. Too many boot prints, too much disturbed foliage. Something big was moving supplies here, bigger than command had admitted, bigger than anyone wanted to believe. Montagnard tracker Yalan knelt, touching the mud with 2 fingers. Trucks, he whispered in broken English. Many trucks, heavy. Carter felt a cold ripple slide down his spine. Trucks meant fuel. Fuel meant roads. Roads meant a full logistics artery deep inside a border that didn't exist. He signaled again. Advance slow. Keep low. Hours passed with nothing but the sound of insects and the team's controlled breathing. Then, just before dawn, the air changed. The smell hit them first. Diesel fumes, thick and fresh. And then they saw it. A road, not a jungle path. A true, engineered supply route. Wide enough for convoys, camouflaged from the air, carved by hand, and maintained with military precision. Carter froze. Washington said nothing like this existed. But here it was, pulsing with enemy movement. He reached for his radio. He hesitated. Once he made the call, there was no turning back. The sun had barely risen when the first convoy appeared. Dust rolled off the trucks in thick waves, mixing with exhaust so heavy the team could taste metal on their tongues. Carter and his men belly-crawled to a ridge overlooking the road. Down below, uniformed NVA soldiers waved trucks through like factory workers on a night shift. There were fuel tankers, troop transports, even anti-aircraft guns mounted on stripped-down Soviet platforms, all of it hidden under a canopy of netting, foliage, and the illusion of emptiness. Carter activated the long-range radio. No call sign, no authentication code, just a soft whisper. Raven, this is Ghost Actual. Target confirms. Send the storm. A moment of static, then a reply so calm it chilled him. Ghost Actual. Storm inbound. 10 mics. The team dug into the earth, covering themselves with leaves, mud, anything to break their silhouette. They knew what was coming. They also knew what would happen if they were spotted before the jets arrived. For 10 minutes, the jungle waited. Then the world exploded. The first bombs hit like gods hammering the ground. Fire blossomed upward in pillars of orange and black. Trucks flipped like toys, their frames cartwheeling into trees. Soldiers scattered, shouting, firing wildly into the tree line where nothing existed. Carter's men held perfectly still. More jets screamed in, fast movers slicing across the sky in tight attack runs. Napalm streaked the road. Secondary explosions tore through ammo trucks, sending shockwaves rolling through the valley. The Ho Chi Minh Trail wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated. Carter allowed himself a breath of satisfaction, until Yilan hissed sharply. Movement. Not soldiers, trackers. NVA counter-recon teams emerged from the jungle like predators, their faces painted, their movement precise and disciplined. These were not regular infantry. These were hunters trained specifically to find people like Carter. The team withdrew silently, using hand signals, pushing deeper into the bush. But the trackers adjusted course almost instantly. Carter whispered to his radioman, "They know we're here. Break contact. South Ridge. Now." The jungle turned hostile in an instant. Shots cracked through the trees, leaves shredded. One Montagnard fighter went down, hit high in the shoulder. He didn't scream. He simply exhaled and tried to rise again. Carter grabbed him under the arm and pulled. They moved fast, but the enemy moved faster. The border, this imaginary line everyone pretended was sacred, was suddenly the only thing that mattered. If they didn't reach extraction soon, they wouldn't have to worry about being killed. They'd have to worry about being captured. And MACV operatives were not supposed to exist. Captured ghosts don't get ransomed, they get erased. The jungle turned into a living maze. Vines wrapped around boots, roots rose like traps, branches clawed at their faces. Carter pushed his team south, following ridges and depressions he had memorized from maps that were never supposed to exist. Gunfire echoed behind them, organized, disciplined, closing in. The trackers weren't just skilled, they were motivated. Someone high up the command chain knew American ghosts had crossed the border, and he wanted trophies. The team reached a dry creek bed and stopped just long enough for Carter to check the wounded Montagnard. Blood soaked half his shirt, and his breathing was ragged, but he nodded stubbornly. "I walk," he insisted. Carter believed him, until the man collapsed. Time was leaking away. Carter made the hardest call a team leader can make. "Stretcher, now." The men tore bamboo stalks from the riverbank, laced them with their ponchos, and strapped the wounded fighter in. Every minute they slowed, risked the entire team. The radio crackled. It was the pilot. "Ghost Actual, extraction window is closing. You've got 9 minutes. After that, you're on foot to Vietnam." Translation: if they missed the pickup, they'd be hunted across Laos with no support, no resupply, and no official existence. Carter pushed them forward. Branches snapped behind them, too close. The enemy was within 100 meters. Automatic fire burst through the trees, tracer rounds slicing past like neon insects. The team dove behind fallen logs, returning controlled bursts. They couldn't risk a prolonged firefight. They had to break contact. Yilan gestured. "Smoke." Carter nodded. The team popped 3 grenades, thick plumes of white choking smoke that rolled downhill. Obscuring line of sight, they used the cover to sprint up a narrow slope toward the LZ. Above them, faint but growing, was the distant thump of rotor blades. The helicopter. Hope. They burst out onto a clearing hacked roughly into the mountainside. The helicopter hovered above, barely holding position in the turbulent winds. The crew chief waved frantically. "Move! Move! Move!" Tracer rounds stitched the trees at the edge of the clearing. The enemy had arrived. Carter's team lifted the stretcher, sprinting the last meters. One man stumbled, almost falling. Carter grabbed his vest and dragged him upright. The helicopter lowered just enough. The first 2 team members threw themselves onto the skid. The crew chief hauled them in. The stretcher followed. Bullets pinged off the fuselage. The jungle roared with gunfire. Carter was the last one in. As he grabbed the skid, a rifle cracked behind him. A round punched through his sleeve, grazing his arm. He swung upward, screaming at the crew chief. "Go! Go! Go! The helicopter banked hard, rising into the sky. Below them, the trackers emerged at the tree line, firing until the helicopter disappeared into cloud. The team lay on the floor of the bird, gasping, bleeding, shaking with adrenaline. No one spoke, not because of shock, but because they all knew the truth. None of this had happened. Not officially, not on paper, not on any map. They had crossed a border that didn't exist, and barely escaped into a country that pretended it hadn't sent them. The helicopter touched down at a remote forward site, used only by operations that were not meant to be discussed. Medics rushed the wounded Montagnard inside. Before Carter could follow, a major in plain fatigues appeared beside him. "Sergeant, with me." Carter obeyed. Inside the tent HQ, dimly lit by a single red bulb, the major locked the flap and opened a battered notebook. No unit insignia, no timestamp, no identifying marks. An unrecorded debrief for an unacknowledged mission. The major didn't look up. "Did you confirm enemy logistics route?" "Yes, sir." "Extent?" Carter exhaled slowly. "Large scale. Continuous movement. Fuel, weapons, personnel. Bigger than reported." The major paused, writing. "Coordinates?" Carter recited them. The major nodded without emotion. "And your team?" "One wounded, no KIA." "Enemy contact?" Carter hesitated. "Intense, organized. Counter-recon teams engaged within minutes." The major's jaw tightened. He wrote something in the margin, a note Carter couldn't see. Then, "Nothing you saw today existed. Nothing you heard existed. Nothing you did existed." Carter stared at him. The major closed the notebook. "This operation never enters the system. You will not reference it in any future briefing, journal, or communication. Do you understand?" Carter felt the weight of the entire mission condense into a single sentence. "Yes, sir." Outside, helicopters rumbled in and out, loading ammunition, offloading fuel, the war machine grinding forward. Inside, Carter felt something binding around his chest. He and his men had risked their lives to expose a supply artery that was killing American troops across the theater, and their reward was silence. Not medals, not recognition, silence. The major opened a metal case and dropped the notebook inside. There were dozens like it, thin, unmarked, identical. He closed the lid, locked it, and slid the case onto a stack that would be flown somewhere far away. "Your team will rotate again in 72 hours. Carter blinked. "Sir, the men need 72 hours, Sergeant." "Understood." Carter swallowed. "Understood." Outside, the sun was starting to rise. Another day in a war where the lines were lies and the truth was buried under layers of classification. Carter walked back to his men. They were exhausted, battered, bloodied, but ready, because ghosts don't retire. Ghosts don't rest. Ghosts get sent back across borders that don't exist, over and over and over again. Borders are supposed to define the world, but in war, borders define nothing. Lines on maps bend, lines in treaties break, and men like Carter walk straight through them. MACV didn't fight for medals. They didn't fight for headlines. They fought in the cracks between official stories, where governments whisper and soldiers bleed in silence. Their missions were denied, their footprints erased, their victories buried under redacted text. But ghosts have a way of being heard. And tonight, you've heard one of them. My name is Captain Nightwhisper, and this was the story of the team that crossed a border that didn't exist. If you're still awake, remember, sometimes the scariest borders are the ones your government swears aren't there.